They love games.
This is the alpha preview of Network Distributed Baking version 0.4. Now, before we get started, there's some initial setup involved where if we go into our editor preferences, we want to enable meta files for version control and make sure that asset serialization is in force text. This just helps us diff changes when we're sending network changes between master and slave. Also, in player settings, you want to make sure that run in background is checked. That way the master and slave can still communicate when Unity has lost focus. Now, this scene here is provided by Kenny Lammers. It's a submarine dock scene. And I'm going to select the bottom edge of the dock and make sure that it's marked static so that we can use light baking. And also, it's got a diffuse shader applied here on the material. Then we've got this bar. We're going to eliminate this cube with the self-illuminated diffuse shader. Illuminated diffuse. And right now the emission level is set to 5. Change it to 50 so you can see a change. And first, objects to bake with the scene, they need to be marked as static. Also, when you change material properties, you always want to save your changes, save the project changes so that the actual files are written. So, for this preview, the master will be selected. And with the master, we can send a bake scene operation to our slaves, and we get that notification when the bake is completed. And here you see the resulting light maps that were returned when illumination was set to 50. So we can change the scale of our light source to be something smaller. We can save the scene, and we can actually send the scene file across to the slave by selecting the scene file and then clicking Send Selected Objects. That will send it to our slave, which is detected. There's status updates, so you can see the slave is working, it's receiving the file, we baked it, the bake is complete, and we get a notification on the master to accept the changes. So let's create another light source. It'll be a sphere. We assign the self-illuminated shader. The emission was 50. We'll change it to 75, a stronger light map. Reduce the scale of the source. Move it down. Change the position of the sphere to get an interesting light effect. Save the scene change. And then we're sending the scene, and then clicking Send Bake Scene. You can do it pretty fast there. You can see that the slave is working again, and we're going to get a notification when the scene's complete. When the baking is complete, we can accept the change. Okay, the sphere light source needs to be marked as static so that it actually bakes with the scene. one light source for as an example is probably better. It's not marked as static here, so it's not going to bake. Okay, so again, you can send the change scene with send selected object, and then you can request a bake operation by clicking send bake scene. And then you can choose to accept or not accept the baking result. Okay, select our sphere. It's changed the emission level to 100. Save the scene. And here I wasn't seeing the change, and the sphere has to be marked as static to bake with the scene. To bake it at all, really, it only bakes static objects. There we go. Mark it as static. Save the scene, and really quick you can just click send selected object, which will with the scene selected, and that will send it across. You can send materials, you can send anything really, models, materials, across from the master to the slave. It will compress them. Just when you change materials, make sure that you save the project so that the settings are actually changed in the file, and then send those. Okay, now we're seeing our changes because it's marked as static. You can also bake individual objects by clicking on the object in the scene, and then click Send Bake Selected. Okay, going for something more interesting here by putting the light source closer to the diffuse surface. Slave is working. Baking is complete. Now I keep modifying the material. Save the project, and then send the material to the slave, and then bake the scene. Really, I can make this saving the project automatic when you send the selected object. That'll be in the next version. There we go. See, when you see the emission level change, then it actually got the material change across to the slave, and then baked the scene. It's fairly quick, but again, the time that it takes to bake completely depends on what your emission levels are and the other light map settings. It can take minutes depending on what you've used. Your slaves can go between Macs and Windows. Your master doesn't necessarily have to be on Windows or Mac. It could be on either. Same with the slaves. Here we go. We can also change the color of our emissive color. Now sometimes you might forget to save the settings. That's definitely going to be automatic. also send the scene across maybe. And we need to send the material. So when you make changes, always make sure that you've got on the master and the slave, you want the same project checked out, and you want to have the same content. So that would mean you want the same scene that you're baking, and you want the same materials and models in both projects so that you get the same result. There we go. And now we've baked a light map with a different color. This has been a preview of Network Distributed Baking, version 0.4.
They love games.